Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I am very excited for my next guest because we are going to talk about how, as an agency owner, you can start to land 6 and 7 figure contracts and opportunities. Most of us as agencies, we get stuck in this kind of hamster wheel of small little retainers, small little profits. So how do we actually up that? And my next guest is an expert at this. His name is Christian Banach, and I'm very excited to have you here, Christian. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And this is a topic that people want to know about. As I always do, Christian, let's start with your not so humble bragging rights. Tell everybody what you've been able to achieve for some of your clients, what you've been able to achieve for your own business. In other words, why should people kind of tune in and really listen?
Yeah, great. Well, again, thanks for having me. I would say what I'm most proud of, our business is quite successful. I'm even more proud of the success that we've been able to help drive for our clients. And we've been able to generate millions of dollars of business wins and even more pipeline for our clients with large enterprise organizations like Netflix and Heineken, AT&T. So some really big companies that quite frankly have been able to change the trajectory of our clients. They oftentimes come to us when maybe they're not in such a great place. And in some cases, they may be considering closing their doors down. And between the work that we've been able to do together with them, we've not only put them in a place where they don't have to close their doors down, but they've really had to accelerate their growth. So I'm really excited and proud about that type of work we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like I said at the very intro, most people don't think that they can even land a company like Netflix or these big contracts. So walk me through a little bit of the journey. Like, how did you even get to that stage where you had the confidence to go after these bigger deals? What was your kind of agency journey?
Yeah, you would 20 plus years ago, I guess I would never have thought I can get into help our clients get into Netflix or Heineken or any of these companies either. I really started off in high school. I started throwing parties. I would rent local banquet halls out and book DJs. And that was the beginnings of my first business. It was small entertainment type events, social events. And those events started to grow over time. We started banquet halls and ended up going to concert venues, ended up working with Lady Gaga and Pitbull and T-Pain and large Grammy award winning artists. And as the events were growing, I started working more and more with brands. Brands were coming to us to sponsor our events. And we started working with some of the bigger brands like Anheuser-Busch and Miller Lite. And I ended up getting exposed to the world of experiential marketing. Some of these brands then came to us and said, hey, can you do events for us? You're great at doing events. So we started doing events for these different brands. And eventually the business became half kind of our own concerts and events. And the other half was these experiential activations for brands. And business was great for a long time. And then the 2008 recession hit and my business evaporated on both the concert side and the event side. I had grown primarily through word of mouth referrals. I hadn't never needed to go out and get business. And then I was stuck. What do I do next? So what I ended up doing is I hired a sales consultant who came in and helped me develop more of a proactive outbound approach to generate leads and opportunities. And I really loved it. I took to it really well. I decided after about a year or so after that I wanted to have a pivot in my life. So I ended up selling parts of that business off. And I went to go work at agencies in business development roles using these insights that this consultant gave me. And what I discovered along the way is that I had a knack for generating these kind of top of funnel opportunities, in particular, breaking into these big, large enterprise organizations. So I did that for quite some time. And then fast forward, it was the pandemic. And in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to do something again. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I wasn't sure what, when, or how. And it felt like deja vu to the recession that had happened a decade earlier, where a lot of agencies were struggling. This time I felt like I was the consultant that could give back to these agencies. So I ended up moving on from the role I had and started this consulting firm. That was about 3.5 years ago now. And we started off with one client, and now we've grown to well over a dozen clients and helping them break into these large enterprise organizations and generate millions of dollars of pipeline and business.
Wow. I actually, funny enough, you mentioned experiential marketing. I had, while I was in university, I did some experiential marketing work. I worked in like the, for us, we have a telecom company called Rogers here, and we did a lot of stuff. And it's funny how you start in that kind of space, because most, when you win these bigger contracts, you always think brand, you always think these bigger kind of activations. You don't think about what us smaller agencies normally think about. So walk me through a little bit of how you started landing these deals, and what was that first big deal for yourself that it fits a little bit more in line with what us smaller agencies think about in general?
Yeah, yeah. I would say one of the deals that I'm most proud about was when I was actually working in business development at an agency, and we were working with an artist, Mark Anthony, the Latin music producer, and we had the opportunity to sell sponsorships for his tour. And we were struggling though. We weren't really making a lot of traction with it, and brands didn't really understand why would I sponsor Mark Anthony. So what I did is I took it upon myself to develop a survey and asked a ton of different questions around what type of alcoholic beverage do you drink? What kind of cars do you drive? Like consumer preferences. And I went out and I did surveys of Mark Anthony fans and discovered that Mark Anthony fans over index in drinking wine. And that was a unique insight because most people were thinking, oh, it's a Latin market. It must be Corona, must be tequila, the cliche things, but people don't really think about wine. So I used that insight and I reached out to all the major wine companies that saying, hey, we have an interesting opportunity for you to connect with a new audience. And it just so happened that Constellation Brands had a new wine coming out they were targeting the Latin market. And this was just a perfect match between the two. So we ended up closing the deal and the rest is history from there. But taking that initiative to come up with some original research, some original insights is really what led to that opportunity with Constellation Brands. And I'm really proud of that because I came up with that whole idea in the first place. But it's really been something that we continue to advise our clients on today is that if you're going to try to break into some of these larger organizations, you can't just reach out and say, hey, we want to meet with you and tell you how awesome our agency is and how many awards we've won and all of that. Like they hit these types of pitches all the time. But if you can do some original research and teach them something about their audience that they're targeting, or maybe an audience they should be targeting, they'll stop and they'll listen to what you have to say. So we've really been able to parlay that initial experiment I did years ago into a really compelling, what we call lead magnet that will attract brands to want to talk to you. And you could be a very small agency and still do some sort of research like this. And that's another kind of way to break in. So you really got to get creative when you're trying to talk to some of these larger organizations.
So when did you decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to go and help these agencies land these types of deals? What was that tipping point for you?
Yeah, like I'd mentioned, I was working at an agency and I had that entrepreneurial, spirit still in me, but I wasn't, again, sure what went or how was I going to do this. And when I saw agencies struggling, it was a lot around business development because agencies historically are very focused on word of mouth, referrals, their networks, and they don't typically do a lot of business development or more so lead generation for themselves. There's a joke in the industry, the cobbler's kids have no shoes. Their agencies are great at marketing for their clients, but maybe not so great for themselves. And I know this is a perennial problem, and a lot of agencies are, sort of allergic almost to marketing themselves, which is a little bit bizarre. So I knew that there was an opportunity for this, and especially when the pandemic hit and there were so many agencies struggling, I just felt like the timing was right for me to make that jump and share that expertise that I, had gathered over the last decade and the experience that I had with a broader audience.
Okay. And in this kind of process of, okay, I want to help these agencies, what has been the playbook, if you were to call it that? Like, how have you started to take all of this experience and then assist agencies in landing these kind of bigger deals? If you could transform it into a framework, into a playbook, what do you take agencies through? Let's do a role play here. I typically work with small to medium sized businesses. Maybe they're 3 to 10, $30 million. Normally I sell them some sort of like performance marketing package or something along those lines. It's, I don't know, $5,000 a month, 3, 5, something along those lines. How do I start to transition? How do I start to think about this? Walk me through the process that you would take me through as an agency.
Sure, sure. So what we like to think about is, since agencies historically have grown through more word of mouth referrals, there's a reason, right? It is still a relationship type of business, but you need a way to proactively generate new relationships. So we've got a process that we call relationship making. And there's really three key components to that. The first thing is you need a way to build awareness and demand amongst your target audience for your services. If you're in your example, you're targeting these types of businesses that are 3 to 20 million. It's really about developing, first of all, like you said, you have at least an ICP, ideal company profile, and it sounds like you have a buyer persona. A lot of agencies we speak to don't even have that. So foundationally, it's like figuring out who do we even want to target in the first place. So once you have that, then you could start to build a list of who the target audience is. And one of the most effective ways that we've found to build awareness is through a thought leadership email newsletter. And it's basically taking your target audience and sharing insights with them. So I mentioned that research report that I did for Mark Anthony. It could be sharing research that you've done. But the idea is it's not a newsletter where you're going to be sharing your company updates. You just won this award, or you just made a new hire. Prospects don't care about that. It's about thinking about how can your newsletter help your target audience do their job better. And that's really been a really effective way to build awareness. So that's part one of relationship making, is that awareness piece. The second part is you have to directly be able to engage these prospects. So we believe that really taking a more proactive one-to-one approach through cold email, through cold calling, but done in a very smart way, not just blindly cold calling and cold emailing everybody, but zeroing in on those prospects that you've built awareness for that are showing some sort of signals to you. And you could do that through technology. Who's engaging with you on LinkedIn? Who is engaging on your emails? Who might be visiting your websites? There's a lot of really great technology that you can see who's leaning in and just directly reach out to them more one-to-one. So that's the next step. But you're going to meet with these prospects. They're going to agree. But when you're talking about these larger deals, especially, you're not going to, this is not a one call close type of business, right? It's a relationship. You're going to share some insights with them on a call. It might be 3 months, 6 months, a year or more before they're actually ready to buy your services. There's nothing you could do to really speed up that process. So you need a way to nurture that relationship over time. You need to stay top of mind with them. But what you don't want to do is every week, hey, do you have a project for us? Hey, do you have a new opportunity? Like, you don't want to be annoying. So what we've also found is that email newsletter that I had mentioned is a great way to stay top of mind with prospects on a weekly or biweekly basis, putting some great insights into their inbox that, again, helps them do their job better, keeps you top of mind. So in 6 months, when that project does come about, they're going to remember, hey, I got this project. I've been hearing and seeing this thought leadership from these guys. I remember meeting with them. They had some really smart things to say. Let me reach out, to them. So there's really these three parts. There's the build awareness, there's the engage directly one-to-one, and then there's the nurture piece. But that's how we think about a more holistic approach to business development for agencies.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you're right. And most people don't even know who they want to go after, and they just take whatever's next up, and that's the wrong approach. But if you build that targeted kind of newsletter and that approach to saying, hey, you know what, we're going to compile a list of our ideal clients. We know it's a long-term game, and that is the name of the game when you're working with these bigger clients. It is a relationship piece. It is about that long-term relationship. So continuously providing them with value, it makes a lot of sense. So with that said, one of the questions we ask all of our guests at the very end of this show is, what is your best growth tactic, right? What is that thing that if you could, as a marketer, you've been in marketing for years, you've done marketing, you've helped people who are in marketing. We all love the next shiny tactic. What is the one thing that you could say, you know what, if everybody really focused on this, it would help them grow? I'd love to hear what that is for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a few. The one that I think is the lowest hanging fruit is something that we call warm outbound prospecting. So when most people think about prospecting and lead generation, they're thinking about, oh, I'm going to build a list of companies and I'm going to do outreach, what we just talked about. And that certainly should be part of the mix. However, people are sitting on a gold mine that most don't even realize that they have, and that's your network. And what we always advise clients to do is one of the first things when you're trying to do something more proactively is go to your LinkedIn. There's a way you can export all your contacts off of LinkedIn. And we would advise, if you're in an agency, having everybody within your agency participate in this, have everybody export their contacts. And then taking that ICP and that buyer persona and start to filter that list. So you might start with tens of thousands of contacts. And then once you filter it out to who are actually decision makers or influencers at companies you might be able to work with, you might be left with a few hundred or 1,000 valid prospects. But these are people that already know somebody in your firm. They obviously like them and they trust them. So you can then do some direct, outreach to those individuals. And I would still advise sharing some sort of thought leadership, some sort of value. Don't just ask for a meeting, share some value with them. But you can say, hey, we've got this really interesting research report. I know we know each other from college, or we met at this conference, or we used to work together at this particular firm. And then we found that the reply rates on those types of campaigns are exponentially better than cold outreach. And those deals tend to convert at a much higher rate because, again, they know and trust you. But people have done a pretty good job, we find, connecting with people on LinkedIn, their contacts, but they've done a very poor job of nurturing those relationships and staying on top of those relationships. And people have moved on to new companies, people have been promoted, people that might have worked for you have gone other. So there's this gold mine of these contacts that are just sitting there unused. So before you even worry about going after cold companies, we would always advise, like, go to your network first and foremost, because I guarantee that there's some really valuable contacts there.
Yeah, that's a really good tactic. I'll attest to that. Slightly different, but we've deployed this in Funnelytics. Basically, a lot of people come in, create their account, and don't necessarily start their free trial, or maybe they do, but of course, it's more of a product-led self-serve approach. So we obviously have email drips and all of that stuff, but the difference between an email drip that's a marketing series versus just an account-based system or account-based marketing, where literally I'm going to go and pick and choose, okay, here's this person's email, their website, and we do direct outreach this way. Similar to what you're saying is we're just basically using our email list as opposed to a LinkedIn list, but we're basically being very targeted with our warm audience as opposed to going straight to cold. That's a really great tactic. Christian, this has been awesome to learn your ins and outs of how to think about these 6-7 figure deals, how to actually get these opportunities in the books. And this tactic was fantastic as well. If people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about how you can help them with these kind of 6-7 figure deals, where can they go?
Yeah, I would recommend, no surprise, we drink our own Kool-Aid. So we have an email newsletter that I really would recommend anybody in the agency or consulting space subscribe to. We share their industry insights, growth hacks like we've talked about here. We share different movement that's happening in the marketing space. So it's a really great resource for people in business development and growth. And that can all be found. Go to our website. It's christianbanach.com. And you can sign up to the newsletter. And on the website, there's a whole slew of other information about us. But the newsletter, I think, would be a really great place to start.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. We will put that link in the show notes as well for everybody listening. And if you want access to that, Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been fun.